All right, well, here we are on Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, for our regular governing board meeting that we are starting at 7 a.m. Let it be known that we have all board members here minus Miss Frank. And we are going to now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And our moment of silence will be for thankfulness that our schools have been able to open. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Let's see. So, Mrs. O'Brien,
I move to adopt the agenda.
I second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. So we will start with our finance report, right?
Madam President, members of the board, I know we opened the walls because we expected a really big turnout for these exhilarating finance reports. So I'm a little disappointed that our followers did not come in today, but I hope they're watching live.
Well, it is because we have such exquisite technology that they feel
is.
that they can watch this from home while they do their homework.
Could be a
I would
tracking
agree.
cam or something.
We're actually going to start with our enrollment report. Probably not the most fun report that we're going to present this evening. As of the end of September, our 40th day was September 29th. The enrollment report for September 30th showed that we were down about 5.8% in our enrollment from the same time last year. As a reminder, we are being funded based on our 40th day enrollment for this year, specifically in regard to our enrollment stabilization grant. We do not have information regarding that based on this enrollment quite yet, and we'll talk about that probably a little later as well. We have seen as the weeks continue and we bring different groups of students back into the buildings, we have seen the Deer Valley online learning program continue to grow in students. At the end of September, it was about just under 1,600 students in K through 8, and it continues to have anywhere between 500 and 600 in the high school grade levels as well. With that, I do want to make a note before I ask for any questions, is we are still working with HR on a portion of this report. The report, as far as the student counts are accurate or is accurate, but when it comes to the number of teachers in the brick and mortar campuses at each grade level, we are working on reconciling them with the teachers who are being moved into Deer Valley Online Academy. And so some of the, in the columns labeled A for average, so some of those class sizes, those aren't the actual class sizes in the schools at the moment. And as soon as we have a better idea of where all of those teachers have moved and we can track them and have firm data behind that, we will update those teacher counts per grade level. And with that, I will take any questions.
Second, Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. Mrs. Mock, so for the online learning for our K-8, the report shows, if I'm reading it correctly, 2 students in 4th grade, 1 in 5th, 1 in 6th.
So if we'll remember, this is the report from September 30th, and those grade levels didn't start till the following week. So those were a couple of early enrollees in those grade levels. The report the following week, for the week of October 6th, I think may have been the report the following week, would have the additional students in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then the report from this week will have the students from 7th and 8th grade. So when we have the report in November from the end of October, that's a lot of months in there, we will see all of the grade levels having moved to the Deer Valley Online Academy.
Okay, yes. Thank you for clarifying that. I keep forgetting about that phased in approach.
No problem.
Sorry, I have one quick question, Mrs.
Oh,
Ordway.
go ahead, Mrs. Reed.
And I apologize. I read my Friday update on Friday and did not reread it today. And I feel like a lifetime has happened since. was there in our Friday update, was there information about class sizes or students to teacher ratios for Deer Valley Online Learning Academy?
It's being tracked separately through Human Resources. I see Mrs. Moffett nodding her head. They are including that. This report, for the moment, which usually is used to show class sizes, is not accurate till we get that reconciled. But Ms. Moffett can speak about the report that they've been presenting.
Okay, thank you.
To answer your question, Ms. Reed, no, in this last Friday update, we did not include what the enrollment was. They were still working on transitioning students in 7th and 8th grade in anticipation for this week. I did receive from Ms. Boone an updated Excel spreadsheet over the weekend sharing what the loads look like. And so I met with Ms. Schubert today to review those and can share those with the board this in this week's update.
Thank you.
In the update that you're going to share that information, I don't know if this is what Mrs. Reed is referring to, but there have been comments here, there, and everywhere that I am a DVOA teacher and I have 80 contacts. So if you could explain to us in the update what that means compared to what other districts are doing and what that workload truly looks like, as opposed to, say, you're in brick and mortar and you have, 80 kids, that would be awesome. Thank you. Ms. Reed, is that okay? Any more questions? Okay, Gary, I see you biting at that bit even though you have a mask on.
Yes. Unlike for Ms. Smock, I do think everyone wants to come see this report. No, Ms. Mock? Okay, maybe not. Yeah, I guess there's still nobody here to watch.
Oh, and Dr. Z, before you start, board members, we're going to follow what we have been doing, is waiting until his report is done and then asking questions. Thank you.
Good question. Are we done with? Heather's not done.
Oh, Heather, you're not done. I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Mock isn't done. She's
Still
got
have
more.
Gee
two
whiz,
more
Gary, you
finance
look like
reports.
already there. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Heather.
He may be hedging on an early end time for the meeting, but we're going to go ahead and continue with the September M&O budget report. And this is another one that in a typical year, we would have an idea at this time how much carry forward that we may have from this year's budget moving into next year, especially as we start the budgeting process going into 21 and 22 school year. We know that because of that 5.8% loss of students, about 1,900 students that did not re-enroll in Deer Valley schools, that we are going to have a budget reduction this year. We know also that it's going to require a December revision, and we know that we're going to be able to backfill some of those funds with the Enrollment Stability Grant, which we had actually been told that we would get an idea of what those funds would be last Friday, but we have not received that yet. So we hope to have that estimate very, very soon.
Ms. Mock, before you continue,
ma'am.
could you go over the definition of the budget stability?
The Enrollment Stability Grant? Absolutely, Mrs. President Ordway. The Enrollment Stability Grant is the grant that will help hold us harmless up to 98% of last year's enrollment. So it's going to backfill some of that funding that we would otherwise lose because we do not have as many students in the classrooms, basically. It will also help a little bit with some of those students that remember from August 3rd up until students started returning for the time any of our students are on distance learning. Those students are being funded at 95% as well. With all of that, we haven't had any reduction in costs. Our costs have been the same. We're still paying all of the same number of employees, or at least trying to keep as many of them retained. And that Enrollment Stability Grant is going to help us be able to do that. And that way we still have those folks moving into 21-22 school year. We expect it to be approximately $10 million. It could be, we're actually hoping that it's going to be slightly higher than that with some revisions that have come out within the last week. There is a webinar next Wednesday that hopefully should explain more about some of the changes that have jumped out within the last week as well. But because of that, the M&O report that we have here is much like the report that we presented in August. We are not willing to present an estimated carry forward because at this point, we just don't think that we would have a carry forward. So all of the expenses to date and encumbrances are correct. but then we have held on to some of the remaining budget capacity in that committed budget balance column. And so if you're comparing from year to year, that will definitely be a difference that we haven't seen in years prior. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Tweedy?
Mine was actually from the previous. When we went over enrollment, how come Bel Air's not on the enrollment report?
It should be on the second page under Traditional Academy at Bel Air.
Oh, it is? Okay. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, it throws me off each time. The two new schools are the Reimagined School and Union Park are right together next to each other on the second page.
Heather, just another clarification. When you talked about backfilling because we're paying the same thing and we're retaining our employees, when you say that, the employees that we're retaining that don't have their traditional tasks are still working. So it's not as though we have, we're just, keeping them, paying them and them not doing anything. So we have given them other tasks because at some point in time, hopefully in January, February, we want to be able to put them back where they normally would have been, correct?
Miss President Ordway, that is correct. And I actually would like to think that we've been very creative in making sure that those folks have a task that is meaningful to the district, especially as we moved into the free, safe learning spaces, bus drivers helping make sure that kindergartners were able to log into their Canvas classes and proceed with their homework while they're in the free, safe learning space. We did everything we could to make sure that every individual had a task that was meaningful during that time, just until we could get them back into their standard position.
Right, because we are in a pandemic, so there are absolutely new tasks that we haven't had before. So hopefully by January, we'll have to hire more people to fill those tasks that the traditional people have gone back to their own jobs. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, one more report, because this is the one I was waiting for.
We have. Now, this one is more exciting because this report gives us a lot of good news. We're going to move into the 2013 bond, 2019 bond, and M&O override report. This is a statutory requirement. However, I think this is one of the most fun reports that we get to present. It is a thank you to our voters in the district that passed both of these bonds and the M&O override and allow us to have these expenses and these projects and these additional staff members that we're about to see here in a second. So overall, the 2013 bond summary, we thought that we knew that the majority of it would be spent by the end of the 1920 school year. Right now, we've spent 94% of that, and the remaining 6%, a lot of that is actually in the continuation of expenses for Union Park, and there are also some technology expenses that we will see coming up this year as well. But if not by December, then certainly by the end of this school year, the 2013 bond will have retired. This is a little bit easier to read when it makes it very easy to see that the majority of the bond is spent in renovating, improving, and maintaining our campuses. So these are all the summer projects that our facilities department takes care of. It includes painting, roofing, resurfacing, carpeting, resurfacing the parking lots, resurfacing tracks. There's a lot that goes on in that renovation and maintenance. And technology, equipment, and infrastructure, you can see is the second most used category from the 2013 bond. This is for our one-to-one student device program. And again, I don't think we can thank the voters enough for having passed this in 2013 because it certainly was a great help when we moved to online instruction in the spring of last year. Other categories you can see here are furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That includes replacement of some of the larger furniture or equipment, new construction and student growth. Usually that's going to be, say, the new campus, but it could be student growth at a campus if we needed to place portables or something like that as well. Pupil transportation, we've bought a few buses and some campus vehicle support. And another large category you can see at the bottom there are the safety measures. A lot of the front office safety remodels have been funded from the 2013 bond as well. So here you can see it by category. The status on the right-hand side, anything that is IP is still in progress and will be finished up this school year. Anything that is C is complete. And I know Mr. Migliorino will jump in if I miss any of the highlights from the spending or any of the amazing projects that we've been able to complete. This is a little bit better. Here's some numbers on what we've been able to do, and this was just in FY20. You will see much larger numbers than what we've seen on these reports in the past for the student technology. 8,900 Chromebooks, 150 computers, and 7,250 iPads to help make sure that our students were able to participate in distance learning. We were also able to provide 880 new teacher laptops, 110 desktops, and that was for food and nutrition department, and 245 monitors. We continue to do network access control appliances, mobile device management upgrades, and web filtering upgrades. Some of the peripherals, AV, and network infrastructure upgrades, that's an ongoing annual expense that IS&T works on. And installation, if you've been to Union Park or Traditional Academy at Bel Air, you've seen the interactive flat panel screens in the classrooms. And those are pretty awesome. And I think they're getting great reviews from the teachers who are using them. But I think, again, Mr. Migliorino could correct me if I'm wrong. Last year, we did purchase 4 buses from the 2013 bond and 3 White Fleet vehicles. Here's some more of the facilities bond projects that we mentioned in that upkeep of our buildings. It includes roofing, fencing, ADA accommodations, playground improvements, lighting retrofits, energy management. The energy management is significant because if when we get to the annual financial report later in the presentation, we will talk about how much money we've been able to save from our maintenance and operation budget due to the energy management projects that these funds from the bond bring to us. And it was not insignificant in FY20. The final projects from the facilities department: exterior paint, interior paint, gym coat resurfacing, resurfacing of tracks, and flooring as mentioned earlier. These are just some of the campuses that were able to benefit from those projects in FY20. Here are some of our favorites we've talked about. Not that all of our schools aren't our favorite, but certainly these had a bigger portion of the budget this year. The Traditional Academy at Bel Air, it was the last of the schools to get a major school modernization. And of course, the construction of Union Park. 2019 bond was just approved by our voters in November of 2019. We did have a few expenses from it in FY20. Mostly it was the administrative costs for the bonds, but we did have some instruction related needs that was paid for out of that bond authorization as well. The major projects for that will start in this school year, and this time next year we'll be talking about all of the projects that we were able to accomplish this year from our 2019 bond authorization. Here's the start of the graph for the expenses, or actually this is the budget. The expenses are so little so far that they actually are not showing, but you can see how we distributed the budget based on what we told our voters that we were going to spend these funds on. And again, here are just the small projects that we've started so far with the 2019 bond activity. And we've got a couple, Mr. Migliorino, is the P for pending? Planning, in the planning process. No, it's down there, preliminary planning, it's down there at the bottom. So we've got elementary 32 in the planning process and some more replacement buses and microbuses in the planning process. We'll move into the M&O override report. Again, this is another voter authorized ability for us to increase our budget. And this allows us to put more into salaries and positions than what we normally would have with just our standard state budget limit that we're allowed to have. We've got, for the 1920 M&O override, we spent approximately $14.6 million toward our existing staff salaries. $3.3 million went toward class size at grades kindergarten through 6th grade. And then another $3.7 million at grades 7 through 12. Specialized programs for students, including our co-curricular, extracurricular, and our full-day kindergarten, since that is not funded at the state level. We spent approximately $5.3 million. And then we continue to put the same amount toward extracurricular activities, our counselors, district and school budgets. Our planning for FY21 is very similar. Our M&O override was also reauthorized by our voters in the November 19 election. And we actually presented that in the same fashion as we are spending it now. So we're not seeing any changes on how we plan to spend those funds. And with that, I will take any questions or accolades for the facilities, IS&T, and transportation departments on the projects that they have done in this last year.
Did you say accolades?
I did.
Well, we could all clap at one time. Ms. Reed?
I just have a quick clarification question. So on the third slide, where you have kind of the summary, it says administration. And if I was just somebody who was going through the PowerPoint and reading through this and didn't listen to your summary, I would assume that that was going to principals and the superintendent's salaries. So is it possible that moving forward, instead of having administration on there, on the 2019 slide, it said administrative buildings, just to have it a little bit clearer so that just for transparency, so people understand that that's not going to, give the superintendent a bonus or.
Absolutely, Mrs. Reed. I think that's an excellent point. And that's one thing we normally do mention that I glanced over is that, when we talk about how we're spending these funds with the bond, we didn't mention salaries. We didn't mention staffing because these funds are really spent on items. And I think when we talk about, say, the $45 million that we spent in FY20, you have an excellent point, and I think it would definitely help so that folks aren't thinking, why didn't I have that money available for my salary? So I appreciate the feedback, and we will definitely make sure that we're clarifying what is being spent on administration. And I think we can include as well that administration overall is capped at how much of the bond that we can spend. So even if we wanted to spend more on our own supplies or vehicles, we would not be able to do that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, and to that point where we have district budgets and school budgets, really when we say district or school budget, we're saying or district budget, and then you go to school budget, it's the district budget would be other than campuses because we are all part of the same district.
Correct.
And one of the things that I was hoping in our culture that we can change is people saying, oh, the district, because we're all part of the district. So I know that it's very neat now. The lines all line up. But if there's some way that we can figure out how to not make it that like the school budgets aren't part of the district, that would be awesome because the district budget doesn't mean this building or this room. It's a lot of buildings. It's a lot of people. And that is something that I think the public needs to understand. So when they hear about how we're wasting money on administration, to Ms. Reed's point, or you hear employees or other individuals saying, oh, the district gets this. Well, we're all part of the district. So maybe we could, at some point, figure out how to make that a little bit clearer.
President Ordway, I think we may have copied this directly from the ballot language, but your point is well taken, and I share your same thoughts, and we will see what we can do to make sure that it's department budgets or, support or department support or something that helps folks understand that everything from existing M&O salaries all the way to school budgets is all Deer Valley District.
Right, and then your point is well taken. It is taken from the ballot, and then we get the Auditor General's report, and it is all very not clear. And I don't think their reports are transparent as to where these funds are actually going. So maybe we can start and change the tide. So when we have our conversations to ask them to change that, we might have something to talk about. But thank you for your report, and the accolades are there. Okay.
Okay, good evening, President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. It is our pleasure to continue with our return to school board reports. So we'll get started. Our agenda for this evening is to do a quick summary of our phase-in plan. And then we also have a few pictures from our day ones, and it is day ones plural since we've had 4 day ones with our students over the past month. And then we have our updates from the 3 work teams that have been providing updates consistently over the past several months. So quickly for those, as a reminder, today was an exciting day. That's why I put the balloon both in multiple houses here. I know in Jenna's house, in my house, in Paula's house, we had students that started in person today. So we were very excited for that. So I had to throw a few balloons on there. As you know, today was the last phase for our students. So our 7th and 8th grade students at our K-8 schools and our high school freshmen, they did begin in-person teaching and learning. We have some nice photos here showing some of our students in the athletics and the extracurriculars and the fine arts with the band. Also here you can see some of our students here wearing their face masks and engaging in the instruction. And similarly here. Okay, let's move to our return to school work team updates. And with this, I will ask Mr. Miglerino if you could provide an overview of the most recent benchmark data. Jim.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. So the latest numbers, the Maricopa County School Dashboard gets updated every Thursday morning. So the latest report is from October 8th, last week. It is for the 2-week period from that includes up through the last full week of September. So this report does show that we saw a decline in both the case count as well as the rate of positivity. So you can see we did have a slight uptick on the October 1st report, and we attributed a little bit of that to the Labor Day weekend. We saw as time progressed through the month of September with the reporting periods that it went back down. Even with the uptick on the rate of positivity, we still did not exceed the 5% threshold that is identified for returning to in-person learning. So I think just as a reminder, as we've talked with the health professionals, they have cautioned us from looking at a single report, and we are looking at this data over a period of time to be able to see if there is a trend. So right now, just with having 1 week of returning back to what we saw prior to the October 1st report, I think it's probably not enough data for us to put balloons on this particular slide. Maybe we can add balloons next week when we see that the trend continues in the same direction. The overall impression of this information is we continue to see positive results that allow us to return students and staff to our campuses.
Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. Our next slide covers the HEPA filters, and I will ask Ms. Mock to cover this slide. Heather.
President Ordway, members of the board, we were very pleased to be just ahead of the curve on this one. And approximately 1 day before the CDC mentioned that perhaps this would be a good idea, we had placed an order for 2,080 HEPA-rated air filters in order to place them in each of our classrooms. We had previously placed an order for our nurses' offices based on feedback from Maricopa County Department of Public Health. The first shipment of 500 of those filters was scheduled to arrive today, as well as the 50 for the nurses' offices. We did have a return to school sub-work team with representation from Deer Valley Education Association, the administrators, student support services, and our lead nurse, who helped establish the criteria for distribution of these filters, since they are coming in 3 phases. We expect to have the first shipment of 500 to those classrooms that need them the most by this time next week. At that time, the next shipment will come in. We will follow the same process and get those out. And hopefully, within the next 4 weeks, we will have all of those distributed and have a HEPA air filter in every one of our classrooms. For our band and our choirs, those are slightly larger classrooms, so each of those will have 2 to help make sure and be able to cover the square footage of those rooms. So in some of those larger rooms, the number that we ordered is set to be able to handle that air capacity as well.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. This slide about district communication contains no new information or new communication structure, for our staff, but I did want to remind both the board and those who are watching that we have continued with a variety of communication structures. As we know, we are still in a time of second order change. These communication structures consist of various parent updates that we have done at the beginning of each of our weeks. So you can see some of the topics that we have covered on those dates, including today. We also have continued with our Spanish video messages and also our numerous tweets that we have done. For our staffs, we've continued with communications from Dr. Finch, again at the beginning of each week, which has contained a variety of important topical information, including the information about the HEPA filters. Also, our fireside chats have taken place each Thursday in the afternoon, and we will continue those one more time at a minimum this Thursday. And then we have our administrator weekly updates, which take place at least once a week and sometimes twice a week. Okay, with return to school COVID-19 communication, again, I did want to review this with the board. And for those that are viewing, here is a sampling of some of the communication letters that we have used. The first one is the COVID-19 unknown letter. That is a fancy way of saying a student that exhibits one or more of the symptoms that is related to COVID. And as we know, there are many symptoms that fit under that umbrella. And so a campus nurse can use that letter for a child who is COVID unknown, and that would go to the parent explaining what would happen and what to do in the future days. Also, a close contact exposure letter. That is a letter that is given, as it's self-evident in the name, to a student who has been in close contact with someone who is positive for COVID-19. That letter also indicates the date range that is needed for the quarantine period. Also, a COVID-19 notification letter. That one has an asterisk because that is a letter that does not always go out. It goes out based on the situation that is occurring on the campus. And so I'll give you an example of that. If we learn that a classroom, it needs to be moved, for instance, for perhaps a certain type of disinfection, so the students move from one classroom to another area on the campus, we know that that is going to cause some discussion and some conversation from the parents. And so in situations like that one, which I just gave to you, that would be an example of when we would give a notification letter to the parents, where it might say something such as, there was a positive case. We, out of abundance of caution, we are alerting all of the parents in this classroom that had a child present. And then we might explain any of the measures that were taken. So again, in that case, if we had to move students, we might say students were moved, and then giving them any other information that is recommended by county. We also have our mandated outbreak letter. That comes largely from ADHS and Maricopa County, as they have a template that they have provided for us. We can insert some specific campus-based information, but again, the majority of that letter does come from the county and from the state. And then our COVID-19 district data dashboard, I have provided some information to you in the board updates about that, and so I want to go into more detail in the next slide regarding this. Okay, so on this dashboard, we have had some, just as the slide states, some stakeholder groups that have expressed an interest in knowing more information about the number of COVID cases that are on our campuses and our district facilities. Two of these groups I wanted to highlight here, DVEA with Harley and his leadership, and also our stakeholder committee, both gave quite a bit of feedback on this particular matter. And both of those groups really had the same voice in terms of that they did want something like a dashboard that would communicate some of this information. Also, a new development from this has been that Kathy Hoffman, our state superintendent, she did come out with this quote here, and I'll just read it, saying that schools should prioritize consistent and transparent communication to help control the rumors spreading through communities about school outbreaks. That was recent. That was at the end of September when Kathy Hoffman came out with that. So this one is a little tricky, guys, on this particular part, because we have had this discussion in some way or another earlier in the school year. And so county has not recommended necessarily doing something like this. County has been consistent with that. This could potentially cause unnecessary panic, might be the word that they would use, or fear from folks that are out there. However, this is being balanced with, again, some of the feedback that we have been receiving from groups like DVEA and the stakeholder committee, and we know that others have expressed this as well. And so perhaps this could, just as it states in Kathy Hoffman's quote, help control some of the rumors that are out there. We do know that there are a couple of districts in the East Valley that have started a data dashboard. I've included those in the board update for you to peruse so you can see the format. They are very similar, the two of them, with one difference being one does not include the percent of the student population and staff population that are COVID positive. And so with this, we have shown this to Cabinet. Jen and I have looked at this quite a bit with the staff and student information. And so we are aiming right now to post this no later than next Monday, and it could be posted sooner. We're just finalizing a couple of numbers that are on there, and we would look to update most likely on a weekly basis. And so let me show you a sample of this, although you've already seen one in the board update. So this particular sample does not list the schools yet, as I do not want to put any of the specific information yet on the screen, but you can see that there is an explanation of what is contained in this dashboard in the top row. And in essence, it says that the current cases would contain those cases where a student or a staff member has been excluded from some type of activity which is on campus. And so if an individual fell into that particular case, again, where they were excluded, then they would be counted in that active confirmed COVID cases, and that would be for students or staff. On the right side, you can see that there is a percent of the total population, and so we would also contain that particular metric, and then there would be a total district at the end. And so that gives you a good sampling now of what we plan to post no later than next Monday. Okay, so with return to school safely and emergency school closure, this again I know is a topic of interest. At our last board meeting, board members had requested some additional information on how this would work for emergency school closure. If this was really one of two things, either ordered by the governor or two, if we reached a situation with our benchmark data where we believe that we would need to go to distance learning. And so you can see the second bullet point here, the two indicators that we have let you know we would focus on. I think we put this in the board update for you, that the two primary ones would be the percent positivity and the case count. And so those two metrics come from the ADHS document for return to school, and those are the metrics that start in the red, and the red is also substantial when you look at the actual categorical descriptions. And so if the district data reflected 2 weeks of 10% or a case count of 100 or greater, as it states there, we would consult with Maricopa County, as we have told you consistently over the months. If there was a particular reason or reasons that they would voice to us to indicate, well, this explains why it's rising to this level, and you don't need to do or take certain actions, then we could do that. If, however, we were in an unfortunate situation where there was the substantial spread, then we would need to look at doing the virtual learning for all at that particular point. Our last one there talks about a particular school zone because, again, the situation that I described to you above is with the district data set. And so then we have fielded questions, well, what if a particular zone, so perhaps a zip code, comes in at 10% or higher on the percent positivity, or perhaps with 100 or greater case count, then we would work with county to identify next steps for that particular zone. Dr. Finch, is there anything you want to add to that one?
I know you did a good job. I think we've talked about it before, and this is what PV is, as they already did this. This is what they did. Peoria looks like they might be heading this way as well. I didn't hear the NEVIC discussion. I don't know if they talked about it yesterday. I missed it, but it's basically the all stop number, and so I think it'll work.
Okay, Dr. Galligan, return to learning.
Absolutely. I wanted to share with you our DVOA enrollment now that we have kids settled both in brick and mortar and in DVOA classes. We have 3,477 students, and just to give you some perspective, that's just under 14.5% of the total K-8 population. It's broken down for our K-6, K-8 elementary students, which are the vast majority, just over 2,600 students. Our K-8 middle school, 7th and 8th grade, about 439, and our 3 true middle schools at 411. For our K-8 middle schools, it's a pretty even split between 7th and 8th grade students. For our true middle schools, 8th grade was a little heavier in the number of students than 7th grade. So just wanted you to have that information. And then next week is parent-teacher conferences. So as I've mentioned before, we will be having virtual conferences for all of our pre-K-12 students. That's our brick and mortar, DVOA, and DVOLP students. Those sub-bullets there just specify that for our DVOA families who would like to talk with their brick and mortar teacher that they had for the vast majority of that first quarter, they can schedule a conference with that previous teacher. Our on-campus teachers will provide that time given for conferences on the 22nd and 23rd for any of their previous parents. And then we are working to have a little bit longer time frame for our DVOA teachers. Some of them have had students longer, and some of them are just starting with kids this week. So the DVOA teachers will schedule conferences with a time to meet with parents between this upcoming Monday and for 2 weeks, ending on October 30th. So that's our update for conferences and return to learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Galligan. And next up, Ms. Jenna Moffitt with Return to Work Safely.
Good evening, President Ordway, governing board members, and Dr. 3 things I'd like to cover with you this evening. The first being our absence coverage planning that I shared with you in the board update last week. An update on what we're working on with certified evaluation in anticipation of completing evaluations this year. And our reporting processes reminders that I always like to include in every report. So we'll start with the absence coverage planning during COVID-19. So as we shared with you at the beginning of this year, when we came up against a very routine process that we're used to in our district and is even often outlined in the certified manual that we would bring to your attention when we developed a plan that would be in lieu of. So this is partially in lieu of, but probably more expansive to what our campuses are used to managing when it comes to what we traditionally have called a sub-row plan. So instead, what you see up here is a basic overview, and the more articulated plan was included on Friday for your review, if you'd like to go back and look at that. So we essentially have 5 coverage options that we're asking our campuses to deploy. We do have a 6th option, which really is the lack of coverage, and so I'll cover that one last. So first, of course, the priority always would be to have a substitute that would have the ability to go into a classroom should a teacher This is not only for absences that are because of a quarantine or a self-isolation period, but of course, personal or regular illness. So the substitute in this plan still offers all of the coverage options that we can provide even with a substitute. So again, a substitute can provide instruction legally and can provide supervision. The substitute can be in that classroom providing the supervision while the classroom teacher is teaching from home. That is still an option. And of course, it's always important to say that if the teacher feels well enough to teach from home, they do not need to take sick time. They are paid because they are working and they are teaching. The second coverage option is if a campus has the capacity to put a certified staff member in that particular classroom for the duration of the day. Same things apply underneath this option. In other words, while the certified staff member is providing supervision, the teacher could be teaching from home. If the teacher is unable to teach from home, the certified staff member could provide that instruction, and we do have the advantage of Canvas coursework this year so that students could remain on their daily pacing and activities on Canvas while the teacher supports, so the certified staff member supports. The third coverage option is the same as the above two, with the exception of the person providing supervision is a classified staff member from campus. Could also be, each of those bullets too, could also be a certified or classified member that we have been able to secure different campus or even the district office. We do hold many conversations in the morning, as you can imagine, or when we do ask a staff member to self-isolate or quarantine, we look at a variety of these types of options. We do deploy district staff for these types of situations. And then the fourth bullet, I do need to point out for everyone's understanding that underneath bullet 3, a classified staff member can provide supervision and often does, but what they can't provide are instructional minutes. So that's why we prefer the substitute. However, if a classified staff member is in that classroom and the students are completing their coursework on Canvas, then technically the supervision the minutes are still being supervised by the certified staff member. So the instructional minutes would count. Fourth bullet, cover the classroom with a rotation of certified staff. This is what our staff is used to seeing as called sub-row. So what we have asked is for each campus to put together a sub-rotation plan with their normal committee that they would put together as outlined in the certified manual and present that to the staff by October 30th so that they can see what those coverage options would look like. This is not an option that we would usually want to prioritize over the above options, but what we quickly learned as we had these conversations with both DVEA and BLT is that school configuration often drives what options they are able to use. So it is more, for example, at a high school, it's far more difficult for them to find one certified staff member that would have a capacity to cover a class all day long like you can at an elementary campus. So they would utilize the order of these options differently than an elementary campus would. And then the last option here will only be utilized with consultation with HR or ALS. And as you can imagine, we don't want to be splitting our students up in this type of environment. However, we did have provided guidance if a campus is in this situation. For example, we do have campuses that have very large classrooms and other spaces that can be utilized where students can be split out into those locations. That will need to be considered. We do have campuses that do have very low classroom sizes, and in those cases, options such as that could be considered. We also have had principals ask if some students could be split and if the media center could be utilized for a handful of students. And in that case, that it could be a viable option. But again, that would be under discussion and consultation. And then the last option that is in the plan but is not listed here would be the situation when all of these options have been exhausted and cannot be used. And therefore, we would be in a position where we would need to notify students far in advance. This would not be something that we would call in the morning and say, please don't come to school. It would be in the situation where we would need to actually close a class and ask students to remain home. Again, not really a coverage option, but really the lack of an option. So we're really just preparing if we were needed to utilize a strategy like that, how we would go about doing that. Okay, so next we are working with DVEA, a BLT, and our evaluation team to look at a couple of things here. The first one is our SLO, our slow cycles and assessment options. For many of our certified staff members, this is not going to be much of a big deal, but for some it will. We have moved many of our staff members to new evaluators and to new student loads. And so, as if you recall, we made the recommendation earlier this year that we would not ask our certified staff to identify their slows until the month of end of December, beginning of January. And that was because we knew we would be moving staff based on where students enrolled. So these teams are currently reviewing how many staff members might be in this situation, what a recommended cycle could look like if it was a short cycle rather than a year. Well, it is a short cycle. It's not a year-long cycle. And what assessment options could be utilized in order to set the slow and lock it in before it's legally due. As you know, May 15th, all evaluations must be locked and entered. And then, of course, we're making evaluation adjustments based on the staffing changes that have recently occurred. And we still are in surplus mode because 7th and 8th grade just arrived, as you know, this week. DVOA numbers just came in over this last weekend, and we are evaluating those numbers to identify if additional movement is required. So based on that, we can make final evaluation adjustments for this semester. And then lastly, for any of our employees listening and for the board's information, it's very important that all of our staff members please go to covidreport.dvusd.org if they find themselves in a COVID situation. And it is very important that they do not go to a work site if they meet any of this criteria. So firstly, if they are symptomatic of COVID-19. If they present any symptom aligned with COVID-19, which we do provide a list of those symptoms on our website, they should not report to work and they should go to covidreport.dvusd.org. If they are currently testing for COVID-19, they should not report to work and report. And if they are living with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, they should not report to work and they should report. And lastly, if they've come in close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, they should not go to work and they should report. And that's all we have for Return to Work Safely this evening.
Thank you, Jenna. Okay, in our penultimate slide here, I wanted to recognize our principals. This is National Principals Month, and I do want to thank our principals at our schools. They really have done a fantastic job. They have been doing an incredible amount of work, an incredible amount of coordination, an incredible amount of communication with staff, with the students, with the parent community in order to provide the in-person teaching and learning opportunities that we have been doing in the phased-in approach. So I do want to acknowledge them. I want to acknowledge as well our assistant principals and our deans, even though it's not their month yet. They too have been doing an incredible job. They are working throughout the day, they're working in the evening, they're working on weekends at times when situations may occur. And so, again, they're just doing a super job. I also want to thank and acknowledge folks like in our front offices, our nurses, our custodians, as they are rising to the challenge. It is a challenging environment, but they're doing a super job for our kids and for our parent community. So I know I can speak on behalf of our cabinet group and say that we are appreciative of all of their efforts. And President Ordway, that will conclude our presentation, and so we would love to field any questions.
Ms. Tweedy?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for purchasing the filters and the dashboard. I think those are two great steps. So thank you. And the first question I have a few here. So is on the dashboard, are you going to name all of the school names, and then if the number's 0, put a 0, or are you just naming the school names that have a case? Or
Yes, President Roy, Ms. Tweedy, we plan to list all of the schools will be up there. And if it is a 0, it will state 0.
and you're going to actually list the school name?
Correct. All the schools will be listed there.
Okay, thank you on that one. And then when you discussed ordering the HEPA filters, it was saying they were getting distributed to the area of greatest need first. Can you explain how you're determining the area of greatest need?
Ms. Mock, could you explain that?
Absolutely, Mrs. Tweedy. The committee, we discussed the first area of greatest need is typically where there's going to be more droplets or air particulates than what you would see in a standard classroom. So band, choir, where you've got more breath being expelled from the students. Level C special education classrooms where students are not able to wear masks, and so you've got more droplets in the air there as well. High school fitness centers for those same reasons. And then we started to look at large class sizes and confined spaces. So classrooms over 35 or 40, which we have probably the highest concentration of that toward perhaps 6th grade, and then certainly in the high schools. So we've got the list of the first 550 basically going out based on that. After that, we look at really average class size and any potential outbreaks on a campus or reported cases. So actually, we can use the data dashboard as well to help us make those decisions too. So if there's a campus that maybe doesn't meet the other criteria, but perhaps maybe has had a couple more identified cases than another classroom, we may choose to go to that school first.
Okay. The next question I have is regarding the communication. If a student in a class tests positive for COVID, is the classroom teacher notified of that?
President Woodaway, Ms. Tweedy, not necessarily. And so that goes to let me bring up the letters that I had on here. That is the middle bullet point, the COVID-19 notification letter. And so again, it depends on the particular situation in terms of what happened. So as I described that one example, that if we had to move a classroom, then all the folks in that classroom would be notified. But it doesn't mean in all cases that the person would be notified.
Well, I guess I would question that, and I'll give you another perspective on that. The teacher does not sit in their desk all day, or at least I don't know of any who do that. So you have no way of knowing the distance they are from their students, because if they were seriously not monitoring their classroom, I think administrator would be aware of that. It'd be chaotic. And I know I have personal friends who have received up to 5 letters in a week that you have students that are going to be participating online until further notice, and they don't know why they're receiving those. So they don't know if they've stood by a student, and it seems that the classroom teacher should be notified because they're the ones in the best position to know their distance from that student. And also it's creating a lot of anxiety with a lot of staff members.
President Ottaway, Ms. Tweedy. So one example of how this is done is when we have a notice from either the county or a parent reports in a positive case, there is the contact tracing process that occurs. And so we usually start out with asking for a seating chart at a school in a particular classroom to see where the folks are seated and how close contact would have come into play based off that seating chart. But we do have conversations with the teachers as well.
Well, we need to, because unless the instruction's going to be all the teachers should remain at the teacher desk and not get out of their seat for any reason.
Right. I didn't finish there. So the next part that I was going to say was we do have a conversation with the teacher, and we ask the teacher to describe the nature of the interactions that occur in that classroom. And so if the teacher reports to us that the classroom sticks 100% to the seating chart in how it is configured in the classroom, then there may not be a need to follow up with additional questions in that particular case. But if the teacher does say, no, we didn't stick to the particular configuration. Let's say, for instance, during social studies, we did a different type of activity. And so if we do get into that situation, then we do need to talk with the teacher, and we would say, well, we're looking specifically at this particular child for this reason, and then have a more in-depth discussion about any close contact that might have occurred.
But if the teacher's not told, I'm sorry, I'm going to take issue here. If the teacher's not told, they're the ones that are circulating the room. There is not a teacher in the district, I would think, that sits at their desk all day. They know how close they were to their students, and they're not being notified, and they're getting these cryptic messages, like up to 5 and 6 a week. That's just not, I mean, that's not cool at all. That's disrespectful, and they should be aware.
Dr. Zerbeck, could
Yeah.
you let us know, in answering Ms. Tweedy's question,
Sure.
but what are our directions for our staff teachers that are in a classroom? Do we have any directions? Do we have lines? I'm just wondering what the process is and the protocol that we've given our instructors to use.
Sure. I think you're asking President Ordway, have we given guidance to our staff about how to prevent close contact? I think that's what you're asking. And so, yes, that has come from both Jenna and myself and the various administrators that are on the campuses, where we have given tips to folks. We've given them guidance in writing as well, as far as what to do in order to avoid that close contact, because our goal is we want kids to be in school for the in-person learning, and a key part to that process is having our staff available as well.
And Darcy, just let me ask one more question. It's all to your point. So if we did have a student that it was reported that a student had COVID, we would be able to determine through the contact tracing if the teacher was able to follow that unnatural don't walk around the classroom guidance or not.
Correct.
And if they did not, then they would be part of the contact tracing, and they would then know. Shaking your head, yes?
No, that's correct, President Ordway. Again, and that occurs during those conversations. We follow up to begin that close contact process. We have those conversations. We look to find out, again, the nature of the interactions that occurred so that we can ask those additional questions if necessary. And this is a balance. And so, again, to reiterate, because we've had this conversation throughout the months of the need to protect the confidentiality and privacy as much as we can of our students, and at the same time balancing it with some of the pieces that you have brought up, Ms. Tweedy, certainly about the folks wanting to know. And so that is one of the driving reasons that we are looking into the data dashboard, so that we could publish that. It would be available to any staff member to see, to any community member could see that, and they would know if there was an update on that dashboard about a case.
I mean, to your point, though, and I know several teachers that have already been in this position, and not one of them has been asked their proximity to any student, and so you wouldn't know. And to the point of the confidentiality, I think this is silly. The teachers are not allowed to disclose, and they're always made aware of student medical conditions. We know if they have epilepsy. We know if they have diabetes. We certainly, and it's protected by FERPA, so a teacher would never disclose. But they, in all other instances, are told about medical conditions of their students. This is just one we're choosing not to disclose. And even with infectious illnesses, I mean, teachers know if their student has head lice and shouldn't return until they go to the nurse to make sure they're clear. Happens all the time. So that just seems to be that you don't want them to know. And I'm going to point this out because I'm glad I'm not teaching here right now. I'm glad I teach in another district, and I'm going to say why. Between this and not telling them, and they're getting these cryptic lessons, and hearing that on the sub rotation and class splits with this going on, I don't see how this will help you retain class in a teacher shortage. Hearing about this as a teacher, I wouldn't apply here. And the teachers that have talked to me about these concerns, I said if they go forward with this, I would certainly look for other options, because there's a lot of districts not doing this to their teachers.
And
Yeah,
I
there's a
would, I
lot
would
of
say
Can I
with,
ask a
that are not contact tracing like we are either. We can
They're
contact the
not telling
county.
teachers that may have come in contact with these students what's going on. They're getting cryptic letters, and they're going to guess if someone in their class has COVID, or they're staying home because their sister has COVID and
may I
they
ask
weren't
a-
exposed. It's horrible.
Can I finish?
Yeah, okay. One person at a time is going to talk. So now Dr. Finch,
Well, let's
and
not-
after Dr. Finch,
All right.
Mrs. O'Brien,
We-
and then I guess Miss Tweedy again.
We do all of our systems based on advice from the county, so we can contact them again and ask them what they think if they want us to change that. That's something
Sure.
we can do.
I would also, if I could, President Ordway, just ask Ms. Tweedy if you can share with us some of the names of the folks that you have said have not had any conversations with their administrators when something has happened. To please share that with me so we can look, because I would
If
say
they
that many
wanted-
times that has happened, it's likely because it wasn't a positive case and it was perhaps a rumor that was going on. But I would welcome if you could share with me some of those, and we can follow up to see if that is indeed accurate, that there was not a conversation with them about contact tracing, because I know that we have been following up each time with that.
Mrs. O'Brien?
I just would like to ask a clarifying question about the process, and I apologize if you already explained it and I kind of missed it. So, a child is definitely identified as positive. District office is notified. You contact school administration and have a discussion. But it is the school administrator's job to have the discussion with the teacher about their teaching style per se, because
Correct,
and to
Ms. O'Brien, yeah.
understand, is there a potential risk for spreading, I guess a higher risk for spreading based on the fact that teacher might be walking around the classroom or spending more than 15 minutes within 6 feet of a student. So is that where that communication happens, is between the administrator and the teacher?
Correct, on the campus. And so the way you described it is one way, Mrs. O'Brien, that the information might come. That would be if the district found out first through the reporting tool.
Mm-hmm.
There are other ways as well. So the campus may be the ones that would find out first, right? Or county may notify us, HR. And so, but it is the campus administrator to your question. I think it's not ALS. It would be the campus administrator who would be speaking with a staff member on the campus for the close contact tracing process. Correct, if it was a student. And Jenna, do you want to talk about the staff?
Yes, I do want her to
Yeah.
talk about this.
Yeah. So if the COVID positive person is a staff member, then it is HR that conducts that contact tracing. We may ask the administration to support us if we do identify that another staff member came in close contact, or if a student came in close contact with that employee. The administrator supports a notification to the students. We also notify ALS, and they support as well. But HR conducts the contact tracing. We own that process for employees.
So if it's a student, the contact tracing is initiated by the campus administration?
That is correct, President Ordway. And it's also no answer is simple here because the county is involved as well. So the county also does contact tracing. And so they may provide some names and say, this is who we have gathered through our investigation. And then there would be our own contact tracing process that we would do as well.
So simultaneously, we have our own, and we have the Maricopa County Health.
Correct.
So we know that all of our administrators that are responsible for this know how, when, and where to report everything. Is that correct? Every one of our campus administrators knows how to do this protocol.
Correct. And we do have a good communication structure for this, President Ordaway. We've mentioned it before, but we do use our Slack emergency management system, and it is a one-stop shop, if you will, with all of the needed documents are within there. And it is a structure for us to communicate with all of our campuses in an efficient and effective manner.
Okay, because I was wondering, because sometimes, maybe not with this, but sometimes I know that different things are kind of applied a little bit differently at different campuses, and that's where we come with the issues and,
Sure.
and the problems. But we know that all of our district administration are doing this in the same exact complete way simultaneously with Maricopa County Health.
That's correct, President Ordaway, and they check in with us as well. And so this is not just them doing their the mic went out on their own. So when a positive case does come in, either through Maricopa, through the tool, or through a parent directly to the campus, it is the process is the campus would check in with us. We provide guidance for them, and then we do check back in with them. And if it comes directly to us first, then we just give them the guidance at the start for them to follow.
Okay.
And I would reiterate, too, just what Dr. Finch had said as well, that we certainly can revisit this with Maricopa County. And we can ask them again and say, has anything shifted or evolved with respect to their guidance on that? Given that most schools are back
Right.
throughout the
Full
county.
capacity.
And so it's possible perhaps that there is an evolving piece to that. And so we certainly can, Ms. Tweedy, revisit that with them.
I think that would be great if we looked at it, because I know that you hear things, I hear things, I think we all hear things, and
Well, it might even be good to check with the Department of Ed and see what they think too.
right. So anyway, we will monitor and adjust as this continues to go on.
Absolutely.
Could I have one follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Zerbuck,
Yes.
a student staying home for an extended period of time and a teacher getting a notice to that effect does not necessarily mean they have tested positive for COVID, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I'm going to take you up on your second follow-up question, sorry. Where do I find, if I'm a parent or community member, on the website, for the students, the rules about staying home? Like, I just found reporting, but I was trying to find these are the symptoms I should be looking at, and if all of that. Is that
so? Yeah. So let me address that in a couple of ways. So first of all, just to emphasize again the piece that you referred to, the reporting. So if parents go to the return to school portion of our website, we do have a specific button on there for COVID-19 reporting, and folks can look at that. There are a couple of additional resources that are listed on that page as well, addressing the county portion of that. We also have provided parent updates, Ms. O'Brien. So to your last question was about, for instance, if they have symptoms. And so we provided that to them, and those parent updates are archived. And so they're put on the website for our parents to continue viewing. So they can see that, for instance, October 5th, we provided that very clear guidance. And it actually wasn't new. It was just a reminder for our parents about if a child is symptomatic, what to do and how to handle that along with quarantining procedures.
And do we provide that same strict, I guess, because Mrs. Moffett talked about what to do or when to stay home if you're an employee. Is there an equally as strict list of what to do when you are a student that has been provided and is on the district website?
Well, if a parent goes and does the COVID-19 reporting process, so in that it's a form is what it is. So we go through it, it has the very clear guidance there as far as what a student should do or should not do, really, in this case, because it's a should not report to school. If it is a close quarantine or a quarantine case and in close contacts, or if it's an isolation requirement because of a positive COVID or a COVID unknown.
Ms. Reed.
Dr. Zervak, to follow up on Mrs. O'Brien's question, on the landing page for Return to Learning, is it just possible to get a quick symptom blurb of if you have these symptoms, you know,
We
don't
absolutely
come to
can.
school?
We can
I
do
think
that.
because as a parent, if my kid had a runny nose or a cough or was sick and I'm trying to find something really quick and I'm panicking, I'm not going to want to go through and read different pages and try and find it. I want to go to one place and I want it to be super, super clear.
We can absolutely do that.
Okay,
And it's
thank
also in I know the board knows this, but it's also in the parent acknowledgement and disclosure form, which had all of the links to the guidance
I know, and I
documents.
know that
But yeah,
that it's been in every parent communication and it's been discussed quite at length. I just reading all of the comments on social media and people asking questions. I just want to make sure that it's very, very, very clear and it's really easy to find and it never changes the place where it's located. So
sure. Yeah, we could do that.
So perhaps we could have the same circle or something on the district website as well as on all the school websites. So
Yes,
it
we
just said COVID facts or whatever you want to call it. But just so it's identified as the same thing.
Sure. We can
everywhere.
absolutely look at doing that.
So going backwards, with the HEPA filters, are we also going to provide those for our office areas?
Ms. Mock, do you want to address that?
And the reason I ask that is because I know that they are, I believe I know that they are now all expected to be back in the office as opposed to rotating. So I was just wondering if we're also going to provide the offices with that.
President Ordway, I'd be happy to answer that. And the answer is it depends. Most of the time, if there's going to be a filter in an office, it's probably going to be due to an ADA accommodation to make sure that that individual can be here and physically working. I'm going to use my best Mr. Miglerino facts here. When we talk about the HEPA air filters, they are part of the overall comprehensive mitigation strategy. And so they would, with fewer people in the offices and a larger square footage typically in the offices, they are not going to be as effective as what they would be in the classroom with 20 or 30 students. So the majority of the offices will probably not have the HEPA air filter in it. They will continue to use the other mitigation strategies such as social distancing, wearing masks, hand sanitizing, hand washing, all of those. And if needed, we do have spares to include in those office spaces where it makes sense.
Okay, and part of that mitigation, is it any longer the rotating, not being in the office, if you can effectively do your job not in the office, so we can clear up some of that congestion of people together? I don't know who answers that one, but it's a question for you.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We talked about it today in cabinet about spacing different people out in different offices that are too tight. We have some offices that have 3 people in them, and they're 12 by 12. And so we talked today about how to move different people around. So
We use all spaces. Yeah.
Yes.
I think maybe a good point to make here as well is there's no manual on this. This is a pandemic that didn't come with an answer key, and so what we do a lot is problem solve. We challenge our principals to think of new and creative ways to solve this riddle that hasn't been solved at their campus. In our case, at the district office, we look at the problem and try to figure it out as a team. So in general, you're seeing that pretty much district-wide. We come to a new riddle every day, and then we try to solve it. So
I just wanted to make sure that even off of the campus sites, but in our other sites, that we are able to use that innovative problem-solving skills. The next question I have is, do we think somewhere that the evaluation requirements per statute might be relaxed or something this year? Because I believe that most of those that are the evaluators are making sure that people are not too close to each other and they're talking people off of ledges and kind of all that cool stuff, plus probably teaching classes. So I was just wondering how we were going to do that.
President Ordway, I understand your question. I don't think that the things that you are referencing would really statute would guide those things. I think we're fortunately this year in a position to meet statutory requirements, unlike last year. Should nothing significant occur for the remainder of this
Oh,
year.
that's kind of cute.
I think what you are speaking to is the grace that our evaluators can demonstrate for observations and final evaluations in these very strange times. And yes, they do know this. We've spoken about it on a few occasions in our weekly meetings. I think that's exactly what we're doing and having these conversations with BLT and DVEA and the evaluation team, providing a variety of options that will allow flexibility in this very unusual year when it comes to the slow.
And I wasn't just talking about those that are being evaluated, but those who are doing the evaluating, because they're kind of doing a lot of stuff.
They are doing a lot of things. To refresh everyone's memory, to anyone that's listening, the board did adopt the change to our language to include or to allow for our evaluators to do one single observation for all of our employees that met the single observation criteria. And that has changed the load for our administrators pretty significantly.
Right. And Dr. Galligan, I don't have a question for you. We talked about the kids from DVOA and scheduling their parent-teacher conferences or student parent-teacher conferences. I'm wondering about the kids that went back to brick and mortar and have a totally different schedule than they did when they were Zooming. Is that also going to be available for them?
President Ordway, absolutely. If a student has a different teacher, we make the same accommodations that if the parent would like to conference with the previous teacher, we'll make that happen virtually.
And is there a way that we could put that out? I don't know how we're advertising the parent-teacher conferences, because that was a question that came up quite a bit this week from parents, and it's only Wednesday, even though I was here last night. And then when we go to the data dashboard, this could be for Jim or Heather or whoever wants to grab this one. Are we going to, when we do this, the schools, the campuses, I don't know if we were going to do those in regions or we're going to do them alphabetically or whatever, but I think it might make sense to do it for our 5 district regions. And the other question is, are we also going to somehow include a dashboard for our other than campus buildings, such as the building where the print shop is, such as this district office building, or facilities or transportation? I was just wondering.
Sure, I can take that, President Ordway. So I'd have to look again on the example that I gave you in the board update. I think we did it by alphabetical order. I think we took it straight from the district site, which lists the schools. And so, but I'd have to look again, but I think that's how we listed the sites. And then at the end, I know we had this discussion this morning to your second point about other than school campuses, what else might we report? And so we had talked about an overall support facility type of description that's out there. In the example that I showed to you from, it's either Gilbert or Chandler, I don't think it was both, but they had listed transportation as the category that they looked at. Jen and I hypothesized that likely was due to the fact that their employees interact with the students, and so perhaps that is why They chose to do it that way. But we, again, we talked about it today. We didn't land yet at a 100% finalization of this is how it would be for that part. But we are looking at publicizing something with that as far as our district sites that are not campus buildings.
And or maybe internally for employees to have their own dashboard so they can see what's going on. Because I know that out there on social media, there was a bus driver that passed away in Gilbert, and there was some concern over that. So I thought maybe to be proactive, we could have something for our employees that they could look at.
Okay, I understand.
Just to throw it out there, and for everyone, be happy because it's my last question. Miss Tweedy, go ahead.
Okay, so the disinfectant sprays that the teacher's using between classes, the number 25, does that kill COVID?
Does the 25 sanitizer kill COVID? Is that your question?
Yeah.
No, we've covered that extensively with our staff, and with our 25 is a sanitizer that's used throughout the day because it has no dwell time. It's safe to use when the students and staff are present. Our disinfectant is our 24, and that's what we use on a nightly basis for our facilities. I don't know, Jim, do you want to add anything on to that?
So that being the case, I guess I would say when you contact the health department, can you ask if it's a good idea to wipe all the desks with the same rag using a cleaner that doesn't kill COVID throughout the day? Because there's some teachers that they're getting, I think 4 a week rags, and they're having to wipe all the desks with the same rag using that cleaner.
Yes, you're referring
classes.
to the microfibers.
So I think they're concerned that they would be better off not wiping the desks than wiping all the desks with the same rag.
President Ordway, I'm sorry. President
go ahead, Mr. McGlynn, please.
Tweedy. Yes, but the EPA does recommend both using a sanitizer frequently and also a disinfectant. In our conversations with the county, I don't want to say that they were surprised, but we told them that we were going to disinfect nightly with the 24 product, and they claim that was not a requirement, but that is the protocol that we've established. So maybe going above and beyond what they would recommend. But the EPA, as well as the Maricopa County, does recommend both sanitizing and the disinfecting, even though the sanitizer that we're using, and any sanitizer for that matter, because the only product that would be registered with the EPA to kill the coronavirus would be something on list N of the EPA registered list, which our 24 product is. But it's because it is a disinfectant. Sanitizer is just a cleaner. We do test both products, and both of them are very effective at reducing the bacterial count on surfaces.
So
it's just that not registered.
So I think the concern that I'm hearing is not so much that we're doing it. And I think, most of us know that strong cleaners can't be used around students. I think the concern is the use of the same rag, because if something were on one surface, you're actually then, so COVID particularly, so the thought that is either they would use a paper towel for each student so that you're not wiping all surfaces, knowing that you could be spreading this with one rag. I think that's the concern more than, so not that you shouldn't sanitize, but how it's being done, if we could get some advice on that. And then the next thing, so on the plan and the number you said with the closure plan. So I think the concern, and I think what leads to, I know with the educators I'm talking to, being extremely upset about how some of this has been handled. And I think it's not all just limited to but I think the perception that there's, that they're not valued by their employer because they're not taking the safety measures that perhaps could be expected based on the county recommendations. So We've been below 5%, which is great, and hopefully we stay there, and hopefully we don't get to 10%. But it's that area between 5 and 10% that's problematic if we're not distancing, if we don't have a distancing mandate. That, it's just basically, if we can, that would be great. And then looking at the sub plan, I just don't think class splits or sub row is really, I don't think it should even be an option, because you're just saying your safety is not important to us. It's just keeping this going. So you have all your sub options that are safe. And if you can't do it, then you do have to go to closure for that class or that school. But to say, I would rather risk your health or safety than to do that and not follow, I guess I just wouldn't support doing that. And I wouldn't want to work somewhere that did that to me. I mean, I care for my elderly mother. I would be very upset that they're making me go be exposed to that many extra people a day. I don't think it's a fair thing to ask an employee to do.
Ms. Moffat, could you go over how that would be customized to the, if you had the space, you could, if you, whatever, that this is not required for every instance?
Yeah, we don't. I think, share the sentiment Ms. Tweedy does regarding the class split being something that we don't promote or necessarily want to do. It's one of the, it's a strategy that's listed as a last resort, and is also why it says it requires consultation in order to do it. So it's not a definite. Just because a campus has exhausted the other options and this they believe to be the only option left for this particular classroom, it doesn't mean it will be something that we will do. So
So when you say that, I mean, there are some campuses that you wouldn't be able to do that at all.
That is true.
Or some classes
there are campuses
that would
we
never
absolutely
even
won't
be.
entertain the idea because we have so many students on the campus. The square footage of the classrooms is very small, and it's not an option. But when we discussed this with both DVEA and BLT, there were campuses and there were principals that said, well, I really could, and let me tell you why. And when they shared those reasons, yes, they could. And so we did believe that we could present it as an option, but one that would only be allowable after a conversation with the district office. As far as the sub-rotation goes, I do know that we already, in years past, have had employees that under ADA or even, as you know, for our DVOA spots, we have placed some of our employees into those DVOA spots who are living with people that they care for, who are susceptible or are higher susceptibility to COVID because they would qualify for FMLA or other medical leave. So similarly, in this conversation with these teams, we discussed that an employee could qualify to not be included in the sub-row plan for that very reason. So we did share that with our principals, and I do want to say that is something that we have done also in the past. We haven't had employees that cannot be on sub-row for reasons such as that, and in these conditions, there could be some of those employees who also would qualify not to be placed on the sub-row map.
But I mean, the high school teachers already have usually over 100, well over 100 contacts a day, and now you're asking them to have 130 or 100, or you're asking them to have 30 to 40 more contacts a day, depending on that class size. It just doesn't seem to be. On top of the fact that the high school teachers, many of them are having to teach online and in person at once, and now you're going to ask them to give up their prep and go sub and expose themselves to 30 more students. I mean, I don't even understand how the principals would think they could retain teachers if they do that. I think you guys got to rethink that one, because you specifically said it was at the high school where they didn't have other staff, but it's at the high school where they're trying to teach online and virtually at the same time, and you're talking about forcing them to give up their prep and then go expose themselves to another full class of students. At some point, people are going to think this doesn't look like a great job. I mean, they're already kind of feeling that way, and this is going to probably push them over the edge.
Yeah. So President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, the priority will always be to have as least amount of people rotating into a room as possible, which is why a staff member that can be in that room all day, classified or certified, a substitute that can be is priority. That is also priority for a rotation. If rotation were to be required, if first you could find employees that could be in that room for a longer duration than just a period, then that is the priority. If you cannot do those things and you do need to go onto a period rotation, then that is why they do have a rotation map.
I mean, again, I would just say I think you need to move up the cancel class and not have those two options, because I just don't think what you're doing to employees, that's not fair.
And Ms. Moffett, who is on the sub-rotation committees at the different schools? There are teachers on those committees?
The sub-rotation map is, I don't know it off the configuration of the team. I don't know off the top of my head, but basically at each school configuration, as you know, is different. So it would be a representative from either bands or grade levels or departments that come forward
they
and
would be
outline the
teachers.
map. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we know that this is not in, whether it was COVID or not, we hate splitting classrooms because that has always been a bad thing. With the rotation, you have the committees coming up with what they're coming up with. And are teachers forced to cover classes during the sub-rotation?
President Ordway, teachers, when let me think of the best way to answer forced. No one's forced to go into any situation, I suppose, in our
Or
district.
maybe I should have used the word required. I didn't mean to use the word forced, I guess required.
So there are, yes, when there is a rotation map and it is your turn to come up, it would be a requirement, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't have a reason why you would need to be skipped and that someone else would need to be asked to come in. A variety of reasons. It could be that you have performed sub-rotation recently and are asking to not do it this time. It could be that you have a conflict in your schedule. It could be that you're out. Obviously, you can't be asked when you're out. It could be that you have a medical reason why you would not want to go, why you would not be eligible to go into a rotation. You could have an IEP meeting. There are lots of reasons why you may not be asked, even though you're being asked, you may not be required to go in.
And I guess some campuses are better at making some of those plans than others. Okay. All right. Any more
I
questions?
have lots. I've been really patient and waited
you
and
have, and I
allowed everybody to
appreciate it.
talk.
Ms. Reed, go ahead, and then Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. Mrs. Moffett, could you provide us an update for our substitutes? I know that we were trying to get one substitute assigned to each campus. So could you provide us with an update for that on Friday to see where we still are? And then if possible, I'd like to get an update on our subs and how many teachers have requested subs that they have not been able to fill, so we can get a good understanding of what our workforce looks like and what our needs are. And then as far as the sub-rotation and splitting classes, I do have concerns about that. I think that they echo the same concerns that everybody in the room has, that would not be an optimal solution. If that is put into play, my ask is that when the schools contact the district, that the district takes note of that and notifies the board that we are going to be doing this, because I think that we need to have a really good understanding of how many times that could possibly happen or how many times it is happening so that we can make informed decisions up here as necessary. And then as far as, sorry, Mrs. Moffett, I'm asking you a lot of questions. And then if you could also provide us an update on our custodial staff and where we are with that, that would be great. Mrs. Mock, for teachers who have done I'm not GoFundMe's, but have acquired HEPA filters on their own or from their parents, what happens? Are they still given another HEPA filter? Can the school use the HEPA filter that was going to go to their classroom in another area?
Mrs. Reed, that's a great question. The school would be able to use the donated HEPA filter however they needed for their campus.
Okay.
If they chose not to take delivery of any of the additionals, we would distribute them to campuses, departments, or individuals as needed as well.
Okay. Thank you. And then Dr. Galligan, I feel like you've been left out so much this meeting. You're so thoughtful. Just a quick question. I would like to better understand what the loose expectations are for absent work for our students when it comes to the 10-day quarantine or it comes to, that they have COVID. I think because schools coming back or classrooms coming back to brick and mortar have been so new, I think that parents need to have a good baseline understanding of when their kids will be able to continue working from home. So I know that in some of our other district communications, we have, a loose expectation of 24 hours of, emails were being returned and things like that. So if we could get a baseline from the district level that schools and teachers could follow and then be able to tailor to what best fits that classroom, I think that would put a lot of parents' minds at ease. And then one more thing to throw out, and I don't know who this goes to, but some of the chatter that I have heard from parents as far as group work goes, and so maybe we could get a clarification with this, is that the kids are allowed to sit together for 9 minutes, and there's a timer that goes off, and they can do group work, and then they all have to go back to their seats for 2 minutes and take a break, and then they can go back and work together for another 9 minutes. So I just want to make sure that that is really clarified, that that's maybe not the wisest thing, because having a 2-minute break in between 2 9-minute working periods doesn't really fit the bill. So if we could get clarification for that, that would be fantastic.
And then, Ms. Reed, just so I'm clear on your request about the splitting the classrooms and notifying the board. So are you asking for, like, on a monthly basis in the board update, some type of, we did this 5 times? I'm not clear in terms of what exactly are you requesting there?
As far as the frequency goes?
You said that you wanted the board to be notified if there was a splitting of the classrooms. And
correct.
So
I think that maybe on a weekly basis in the Friday update, if that had to have happened, and then to let us know what school, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, a long time ago they used to do that when we were doing it, and we were told it wasn't being done, and then all of a sudden it was. So it's just to bring back from a long time ago.
And thank you so much. That is it. All my questions. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Mrs. O'Brien, are you ready?
Thank you so much. And so I'll start with Dr. Galligan. The good news is it's to that point as it relates to Mrs. Reed's question. I think that if you could help us understand, and if not tonight, I'm happy to get an update, what the tight expectations are for teachers in having their work or their videos or however they're doing on Canvas, so that students who are absent whether it be for quick sniffles or for 10 to 14 days because they may or may not have COVID. There seems to be, we don't seem to have that standardized across the district. And so some parents are saying, yay, my kid's home, but we're able to get our work done in a timely manner. And other parents are saying, my teacher said, see me when you get back, which could be very daunting if it's a couple weeks. So that would be very wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for the dashboard data. I'm very excited that we'll be having that. So that's just a thank you in the middle as I go down my sheet. Dr. Zerbach, emergency school closure. You reference a school zone in your slide, and then you briefly touched on or spoke to possibly being a zip code. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that or help us understand a little bit more what that would look like, or what is a school zone?
Sure, President Orway, Mrs. O'Brien. So that really does refer to more of a zip code type of format. So we do get the data at the zip code level. And so if in this particular case, this last bullet point, if we do have a zip code that is trending in that fashion where they are in the substantial spread for multiple weeks, then we would need to be in consultation with county to identify what would be recommended next steps for the schools that would be in that zip code range.
So then if I might just suggest we be a little bit more specific with that terminology. I think we've all learned how much words matter. And so if we could say a zip code within a school, because I just think parents, the more clear we can be,
Sure.
I just think the better. And I appreciate that y'all are working with the county on this. So thank you for that. Parent-teacher conferences, is there a standard for how long they are?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, typically 10 to 15 minutes, although in some cases it could be up to 20. Once upon a time when our primary teachers would do group conferences where 2 or 3 parents would come in together, those would usually be for 20 minutes, but it generally ranges from 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. And then I might like to suggest that once upon a time when I never entertained an option or never had a thought to become a substitute teacher, my child's class was split, and it was happening on a somewhat more regular basis, I think, in the district. We actually marketed for substitute teachers. So, and I've seen a couple of Facebook posts from other districts saying, look, if you have your bachelor's degree, and I realize there's some discussion about hoping the state will lower, or I shouldn't say lower, change the standards. But I might recommend we do some advertising to say, if you have your degree and here's the links and this is how you do it, and we would really love to have you, and our children and our staff would be eternally grateful for you to substitute, because I know we go through these cycles sometimes. And I would also just like to echo, not super excited about splitting classes. I realize it's just in a plan, and I'm very excited about having plans, but I would hope that we would be most selective in choosing that option, and it be in the most an extreme emergency. So thank you all for all that you've done and for another great report.
Thank you, everybody. We can now, unless you have something else you want us to talk about, we could move on to the next item.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
You're all good?
I'm good.
Dr. Finch, you good that we move on?
Good to go.
All right, Mrs. O'Brien.
I just want to verify we do not have any public comments. Okay,
We have 0 public comments for today.
wonderful. You just let me catch up real quick. I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items 4A through 4H.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? We can move to 5A.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 None opposed?
I move that the governing board approve revised minutes from the regular meeting held from July 14th, 2020.
I second.
Okay, I am going to be reading something. This is pertaining to those revised minutes. On October 1st, 2020, the district received notice from Arizona Attorney General's office that it completed an investigation of claims that the district violated open meeting laws while the public has not been able to attend meetings in person. The letter further notified the district that a single violation was found to be substantiated by the Attorney General's office. Specifically, the Attorney General's office determined that minutes for the July 14th, 2020 regular board meeting should have included the names of individuals submitting written comments through the designed quote-unquote public comment link for that meeting and a reference to the legal action about which they submitted the comments even though they were not read by myself, the board president. So to remedy this oversight that we did not include all the names in the minutes, we will now, we're taking our action tonight to approve the revisions because we have revised the minutes for the July 14th, 2020 meeting, along with a related addendum to those minutes to reflect the names of the 157 individuals who submitted written comments through the designated quote-unquote public link. And note that those written comments were submitted in relation to agenda item 6F to approve all Deer Valley Unified School District classes to take place online until the end of the first quarter of the 2020-2021 school year. So there you have it. And is there any discussion? Then we can vote. All those in favor of approving the revised minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. There are no oppositions, so we can move to 5C.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the annual financial report for fiscal year 2019-2020.
I second.
Ms. Mock, you have your clicker, so are you ready?
President Ordway, members of the board, I am ready for the final finance report of the evening. This one is in regard to our 2019-2020 annual financial report, or AFR. We always like to start this report with a reminder that it is actually required that we receive governing board approval, and governing board approval of this report has to be completed before October 15th. So we are getting this in just in a nick of time with our one October board meeting this year. It is also a standard reminder that this is all after the fact. So when we talk about there are a lot of moving parts at the end of the year and we're not sure where all of those parts are going to fall, this is the report that shows us exactly where everything landed and how we were able to ensure the proper and fiscally responsible use of our budgets. It helps if I go the right way. Hold on. All right. So we're going to start with just some highlights from the annual financial report. It's about 8 pages, and some of them are in standard finance or Jim font. So we like to pull out some of the most notable items from the report. To start with, our overall district expenses increased from $344 million in FY19 to $377 million in FY20. When we say all expenses, we're talking about expenses made in Fund 001 all the way up through 799, which are all considered district funds. Our overall M&O spending specifically was up just $1.2 million or 0.5%. And that was due to an increase in state funding and a slight increase in students. Our spending on salaries for FY20 did increase $6.4 million or 4.8%. When we adopted our budget for FY21, at that time we were projecting our carry forward from FY20 to be about $4.29 million. Because of the not necessarily freeze on spending after March 15th, but certainly without students and teachers and staff in the schools, we had quite a bit fewer expenses for the last quarter of the year. So we actually were able to realize about a $13 million carry forward from FY20 moving into FY21. Want to make sure and note that just under $9 million, we really don't want anyone to start deciding where to spend that just yet. We know that we are going to be held harmless in this current fiscal year, FY21, or mostly harmless by the enrollment stability grant. There's no such legislation at this time that holds us harmless for 21-22. We think that year financially may actually be a little more difficult than this current fiscal year. And so our plan at this point is to hold on to that $8.7 million and try to have that in carry forward again at the end of this year to use in 21 and 22. Our overall instruction spending remained consistent at 60% of our M&O. It is important to note, though, that you may have seen it on the AFR, that general instruction did decrease. You will see about a negative 2% decrease in instruction spending. We want to make sure that everyone knows that is not due to a decrease in teachers or teacher salaries. That actually was a result of FY19. We approved making an additional prepayment to our insurance of about $2 million. And that when we make those prepayments, they are on that instruction line as teachers make up the majority of our staff members. However, we were able to maintain the 60% of overall instruction because we had a similar increase in our special education staffing on the instruction line. So overall instruction spending actually increased by just under $1 million, keeping us at 60% of our M&O spending for instruction. And that number's been right around 60% of M&O for the past several years, and I think almost as far back as we've tracked. Maintenance and or operation and maintenance, which we actually typically call our facilities department, that's the other category of M&O spending that decreased. It decreased by about $1.8 million, and that's where we saw a lot of the spending freeze, for lack of a better term at the moment, from March 15th till the end of the school year. There's a lot less in custodial supplies, utilities, electricity. Part of that is also what we mentioned earlier in the bond spending report. We talked about the utility management program. So about $1 million of that savings is actually in utilities, attributable to the utility management program. Capital spending did increase this year, not quite double what it had been in the past. We were finally able to, with the state increases to district additional assistance, to be able to fund our capital at a higher rate than we have since, I think, 2011. After the cuts in 2008, starting at about 2011, we saw some significant decreases in our capital funding. And we were very happy to be able to keep and spend 8.1 in capital this year, or FY20. And a lot of that went into our curriculum adoption last year, our instructional software, and other student support software as well. So the page that we just reviewed, this is what it looks like in Gym font. You'll see up there on that top line that negative 2% in regular education instruction. You will see increases in special education instruction, and then we will see the decrease in the 2600 operation and maintenance. This is an important comparison that we make each year as well. These are the percentages for each of those categories that we just looked at, the percentage of the overall total expenditures for FY20. Most of these percentages remain the same from FY19 moving into FY20. The two categories of note that shifted a percentage are going to be 2,500 central services did uptick from 3% to 4%. And I believe the other decrease, thank you, was the decrease was in 2,600. As we just noted, they had 1.8 million fewer expenses than the year prior. The increase in 2,500 central services was due to the election that we hosted last year for M&O and bond override. With that, that is the end of the AFR report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Okay, everyone's raising their hand at one time. I see there's no questions. Shall we take a vote? Yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There's
Aye.
no opposed, so the ayes have it. Next.
I move that the governing board accept the emergency procurement report outlining the purchase of air purifiers and filters for all classrooms in a school setting.
I second.
I just want to say I think that was a very awesome next layer, additional layer of keeping our employees and students safe. If anyone else has anything to add, if not, we can just vote on that.
You want information from Jim or
I
Heather?
think
You got it?
I mean, we already got like a lot of it. I don't know that
Okay.
we need to know the make and model.
Excuse me, President Ordway, should
ma'am.
maybe we have Mr. McLarino, or if it's Ms. Mock, I'm not sure, explain a little bit about the emergency procurement process and
Oh, sure.
to
Absolutely.
explain so our folks
Jim or Heather,
understand
you
how
want to
that
talk about
occurs.
the emergency procurement process?
Certainly, President Ordway, members of the board. The actual emergency procurement is outlined in the administrative code for the procurement code, and we have provided that in the documentation. And our director, Ms. Simonowski, has asked for a signature on this to be able to have this for the record. So we're going to ask Dr. Finch to sign this pending the vote from the board. I don't want to be presumptuous here, but the emergency procurement allows for whenever there's a specified reason. In this case, the safety and health of our students and staff, for us to utilize the method of being able to make the acquisition in this manner without going through the formal process. We are actually acquiring these on a cooperative contract, so the procurement has actually been met, but it is we are deeming it as an emergency because the order was placed prior to going through the formal process, getting the board's approval. We did discuss it at a board meeting, and you may have recalled that I commented that it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 to make this acquisition, if we could even get them. We thought maybe November. When we went back to that vendor the very next morning, we were told it was January, and the date kept moving out into the future. I wanted to recognize not only our purchasing folks, but also our facility staff. They found an alternative provider, but the board did not give us authority to make this purchase similar to what we do in at the beginning of each fiscal year, where we do blanket orders to be able to say we have up to a limit to spend with a particular vendor. So since the board did not give us authorization for this $700,000 expense, which is less than what I quoted with this alternative vendor, that's why we're deeming it as an emergency.
That's awesome. It wasn't Amazon Prime Day, though, so you got it prior to that. All right, so we can vote now. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposed. So that brings us to our fabulous preview.
Okay. All right, President Ordway, members of the board, this is a preview for a revision with policy KB. This is really a very simple and concise preview. There is just one minor piece that has been proposed, and that is for the district to post on the website in a spot where parents can access it. The piece that there is a statutory handbook of parental rights that the parents can view. So it is actually something we already do, but it is for preview tonight. And then we would bring it back, as it says, on November 10th, 2020. And that is it. It is truly very simple. It says that we would post on the website.
A quick question,
Oh, yes, ma'am.
and I apologize if it's like the elephant in the room, but what are we posting? I mean, is the document created or is it linked to something else?
Yeah, it's in the, Ms. Reed, it's in the administrative code. So the handbook of parental rights, it has things such as parents have a right to review the course of study for students, things like that. And so this revision in the policy states that we would put that on the website somewhere, that parents have that right. And so again, we already do this in our listing of resources for parents. So, but this would put it officially in policy for us.
No, I understand that. I sorry if I wasn't clear. I'd like to. Is it just a link to the administrative code? Is that what it is, or is this an actual?
No, it would be a
put
link.
together?
It would be a link to the actual documents here, so they would see what is contained in these sections.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. O'Brien? No? Okay. It's a preview. We're good. Any questions? We can certainly send friendly emails. B? I know you've been waiting all night for us. Go ahead. You did get an evening salad in the shape of a brownie, so go ahead.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, and our viewing guests. This evening, Christine Allred, our pre-K-12 Science CIAS, and I will share a preview of the 3rd through 6th grade Science Adoption Committee's recommendations for science resources beginning next school year in the 2021-22 school year.
Sorry, I'm getting used to the microphone. Good evening, President Ordway, Superintendent Finch, and members of the board. Our committee was made up of teachers and parents across the district that represented the general education, special education, and gifted education perspectives. The new Arizona science standards represent a significant shift in instructional practice and minor shifts in content between grade levels. Arizona standards do not directly align with the next generation science standards that most current curriculum materials are now written to support. Our team completed a thorough evaluation of the materials submitted by various vendors, looking at the alignment to Arizona standards, as well as supporting three-dimensional instruction. Three-dimensional instruction includes the integration of core science topics with the science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts. single resource that meets all of Arizona's new standards is not available for purchase. So the Curriculum Adoption Committee selected a combination of resources to supplement curriculum written by our district teachers. In December, we will submit a materials order with an expected delivery date in early February. Our Deer Valley Education Foundation Science Center employees will prepare the new kits for delivery to teachers at schools, as well as transition the Science Center warehouse configuration to support the new materials for grades 3 through 6. Professional development will be delivered this upcoming spring and summer for all teachers in grades 3 through 6 that teach science. These science resources will be fully implemented in the 21-22 school year. As I stated, professional development will begin in the spring of 2021 for returning teachers. Additional sessions will be held over the summer and closer to the start of the 21-22 school year for new teachers and those teachers changing grade levels. The next few slides, we're going to put through a description of the different materials that we're putting forth for adoption. In its lessons, Picture Perfect presents science concepts using picture books. Science students are engaged in the lesson through a high-quality fiction book that sparks curiosity and raises questions that students will seek to answer through investigations. As students engage in the lesson, they build their understanding through investigation and a nonfiction paired text, thereby merging science content and literacy skills. The adoption will include teacher materials, copies of the picture books, and materials for investigations for each teacher. The adoption includes a perpetual license for the teacher materials, the picture books, and the kits. Replacement of consumable materials will continue through the Deer Valley Education Foundation Science Center. Picture Perfect lessons support teaching and learning in grades 3 and 4. Mystery Science utilizes an engaging structure of mysteries to present science concepts to students. The resource includes video-based materials as well as text resources and hands-on activities. The materials for these activities will be included in the science kits prepared, maintained, and distributed by the DVF Science Center. Mystery Science supports teaching and learning for grades 3 through 5. Explore Learning's gizmos provide online simulations to support student understanding of science topics. In addition to the support materials provided by the resource, gizmos are a flexible resource and are a valuable tool allowing students to manipulate variables that might not be possible with physical materials. As an added bonus, the license also includes gizmos that support math concepts that would be available to all K-6 teachers. Learning A to Z Science Component Science A to Z is a text-rich resource that will supplement the district curriculum for 6th grade science. In 5th grade science, STEM Scopes is a versatile resource that blends well with the Mystery Science and Gizmos resources. Together, these 3 resources provide materials to teach all of the 5th grade Arizona Science Standard.
We feel that the resources presented meet the majority of the Arizona Science Standards for grades 3 through 6. Over 12,000 students in grades 3 through 6 will benefit from these science resources that integrate digital and hands-on components, and even one of them, literacy skills. The 3 through 6 science adoption, including tax and shipping, will be $763,000, which is within the budgeted amount for curriculum adoptions for the 2020-21 school year. You will also note that included in that amount is the cost to actually create the Science Center kits to support the adopted materials. If you remember, we have FOSS kits. Those will be broken down and recreated for the new materials and then delivered to our campuses and our teachers. With that, that's our preview, and we'll take any questions that you might have.
Miss Tweedy? Oh, you know what? You're behind her yet.
I was just curious if we were planning on making any adjustments to the amount of adoptions or anything, given that you were concerned about the budget next year. Are there any things that can be delayed, or? And not saying this, but I maybe this. I'm just curious about that.
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, if you saw on one of the previous slides, the last adoption we had for this group of grade levels was, I believe, 2011. So we are at about 10 years with our current resources. We absolutely work closely with Heather and Jim on the budget that we have in place each year. We will be bringing another adoption later this year, and it will be for world languages, which is also at about that same time frame. But we plan on maintaining the amount of budget that's been set forth. And I don't know, Jim or Heather, if you want to just address that.
Mrs. Tweedy, members of the board, we actually, Dr. Galligan and I believe in executive cabinet, we actually looked at all of the textbook adoptions that we had planned for this year. Curriculum had about 5 different curriculum adoptions planned. We marked the ones that were specific that really needed to be done right now. We actually still have all of them in the total capital budget, but we know that if we need to make cuts and reduce the amount of district additional assistance going into capital, that we can take those specific additional 3 curriculum adoptions out. And otherwise, they will remain in the budget for next year or perhaps even the next year. But we will continue to prioritize the curriculum to make sure that it's relevant without overextending our budget.
So you and Mr. Miglarino feel we can afford this? That's, I guess, the question.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Reed?
Normally when we adopt curriculum, we have it available for parents to preview in the lobby of the governing board room. Is there another option virtually where parents can preview this?
President Ordway, Ms. Reed, we did have it available virtually, actually,
Okay.
and we can continue to have that available for parents. And I'll ask Chris to just explain how we were able to do everything pretty much virtual this time.
President O'Reilly, members of the board, we did have a 60-day public review as required by law. For the materials, they were available online for parents to review. They were posted on our website. They also went home in the weekly emails to parents, as well as the links for those, and had access and had all of the, on our district website, it had access information for parents so that they could see all of that.
No.
It also was available for review by teachers as well.
Was there any public comments that were received?
There was a few. We've had, over the years, even when we do have it out in the lobby, the amount of public review is usually pretty small.
Mrs. O'Brien?
When you said you had a few comments, were any of them negative?
President Orway, Ms. O'Brien, no, none of them were negative.
And do you think we received more comments with it being available online than when we have it just available in the front lobby, Dr. Galligan?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, I'd say it was probably fairly similar. But the positive thing is we did have parents. As you remember, we put this out in our social media, and we were able to actually have parents participate this time with us, and we'll be doing that for any further adoptions as well.
You had parents on the committee this time. Thank you so much for putting that out on social media and for finding us a way to make it available virtually. I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate that, and I also appreciate that Deer Valley Education Foundation is working hand in hand with us on this. So any further inquiries we have about this science adoption, I guess we could email that to the appropriate person. So we will move on to governing board reports. Mrs. O'Brien?
I have no report this evening.
Well, I know you have a lot to say, but it's late. Mrs. Reed?
Just want to say thank you to all of our staff and our teachers and our administrators and our parents and our students for getting us this far. And thank you to all of those that are following the safety procedures that our district has set forth so we can keep our school doors open and keep everybody safe.
Ms. Reed? Or I'm looking at Ms. Tweedy and I said Mrs. Reed. It's not that late. Mrs. Tweedy.
No report. Thank you.
I just want to wrap it up by thanking everyone, and I cannot describe to you, Mrs. Reed did get to see it on Friday, how exciting it was to be at a football game or 2 or 3 and listen to the band and see parents, and it was just kind of like a cool Friday night. So, and yes, I did get to 3, Dr. Finch. Anyway, did you have something that you wanted to talk about? A couple of schools that
Yeah,
did
I could
things
do
that
that.
are shaped like that.
Yeah. We have, I'm sure you heard via the Friday update, but we had 3 schools join the A+ School of Excellence. Woo! Canyon Springs, Desert Mountain, and Gavilan Peak. And that brings our district total to 20, which I'm sure Chandler isn't even close to that. Just saying. It stinks being number 1, just saying. But somebody has to plow the trail. So great job to our principals. That's a lot of work, and that's an outside body that comes and grades us. And we have a decent success rate, but we don't bat 1,000. So it's a ton of work, and a lot of our principals go back and try it again and try it again and try it again, because we have obviously excelling as an institution. So this is great to see. Second thing I wanted to just fill you in today, Dr. Galligan and I went downtown to visit with some businesses as we try to reel them into Deer Valley, and that was exciting, being able to talk and brag about Deer Valley and the great things that are going on. So we hope to reel them in to come to our district and use it as a place of business. So pretty exciting.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? To create
Absolutely. You can have 2.
business partnerships, or you're trying to entice businesses to move within our district?
Yes and yes.
Good for you. You got a twofer.
Yeah, the answer is yes to both, because that's kind of how we sold it as well. Dr. Galligan, as you know, she'll know more about Deer Valley, or she'll forget more about Deer Valley than I'll ever know. She's a walking encyclopedia. And so we did talk about WestMec and our own CT operation that we have, and how we like to develop business partners, because we have over 1,000 that are in our group. And so we talked a little bit about that, but mainly about how Deer Valley's the great location, and then obviously our school performance in relationship to our peers. So more about attracting those businesses to up north. And so they were receptive, and we gave them our business cards, and we gave them a Deer Valley mask, which was a big hit. I thought that was pretty cool. So if you see one running around in some car on the street, you'll know, that guy there, he got that from Dr. Finch.
I just wanted to say one more thing about it was great for the A+ schools, but, or in addition to it's great, I just wanted to let Gavilan Peak know that we are thanking Chad Segerstein, even though he's not here. He did think that, I could feel those unicorns flying. He was very happy and proud of that. So with that, if anyone wants to make a motion,
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I
Second. Oh.
I think everyone might say aye. Aye. 9:24.